A code of dancing little men hides a secret that can kill. Only Holmes can decipher it. Welcome to Revenge Oath. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from. Your thoughts make this journey unique. Now let's dive into the mystery. It has long been my contention that the mental faculties of my friend Mr. Sherlock Holmes operate upon a plane entirely separate from that of ordinary men. His mind is a precision instrument honed for the dissection of the inexplicable, and I have been privileged, as his chronicler and confidant, to witness its workings upon some of the most singular problems to ever perplex the official force at Scotland Yard. It was upon a bleak Tuesday in November, the year 95, that a case was laid before us which, for sheer, baffling circumstances, remains one of the most intricate in my memory. A persistent yellow fog had clung to the city for 3 days, coiling in the streets like some malevolent phantom and reducing the great metropolis to a series of vague, looming shapes and muffled sounds. Baker Street was particularly afflicted, and from my chair by the fire I could scarcely perceive the opposite pavement. Holmes, in one of those fits of restless energy which were the antithesis of his occasional languor, paced the room, his eyes occasionally flicking towards the window with an expression of profound distaste. "A curtain, Watson," he remarked, his voice sharp with impatience. A grimy theatrical curtain drawn across the stage just as the play promises to become interesting. Crime does not halt for the weather, but its evidence is obscured, its trails washed clean by this filthy, pervasive damp. I lowered my medical journal. I should think even the criminal classes would prefer their own firesides on such a day. The petty thief, perhaps. But the true artist, the dedicated malefactor, finds opportunity in such obscurity. It is a canvas upon which he may paint his misdeeds with a bolder brush, knowing the world is half blind. He ceased his pacing and picked up his violin, drawing from it a low, mournful note that seemed in perfect harmony with the gloom without. It was at this moment that we heard a sharp clatter from below, followed by the determined rap of the door-knocker. Mrs. Hudson's footsteps sounded on the stair, and a moment later she ushered into our sitting-room a client who appeared to have brought the tumult of the weather in with him. He was a gentleman. That much was immediately apparent from his well-cut though mud-spattered coat and the quality of his hat, which he clutched in a white-knuckled grip. He was a man of perhaps 45 years, with a strong, clean-shaven face that might ordinarily have conveyed authority and vigour. Now, however, it was pale and drawn, his eyes wide with a look I recognized as the aftermath of a profound and recent shock. The moisture gleamed on his shoulders, and a drop of water fell from the brim of his hat to stain the eye.
"Carpet, Mr. Holmes," he said, his voice strained yet courteous. "My name is Alistair Finch. I come to you from Blackheath on a matter of the most urgent and dreadful nature. I am at my wit's end, sir, utterly at my wit's end." "Pray compose yourself, Mr. Finch," said Holmes in his most soothing tone, gesturing towards the basket chair. "My friend here is Dr. Watson, whose discretion is as absolute as my own. Take your time and tell us your story, though I would advise you to begin at the beginning, the facts, if you please, and reserve any theories you may have formed until you have laid the groundwork." Our visitor sank into the chair and accepted the glass of brandy I proffered. The restorative spirit seemed to steady him, and he drew a long breath. "The facts, Mr. Holmes, are these. My business partner, Mr. Theobald Grayson, has vanished into thin air." "Vanishing is uncommon, but not unheard of," Holmes murmured, steepling his fingers and closing his eyes. "Proceed." "We are corn merchants, Grayson and Finch, with offices near the docks and a private wharf of our own. Our business is substantial, and our reputations, I flatter myself, are unimpeachable. Theobald, Mr. Grayson, is a bachelor, a man of rigid habit and punctuality. Yesterday morning he arrived at our offices in Wapping at precisely 8 o'clock, as is his invariable custom. He worked throughout the morning, was seen by the clerks, gave instructions to the foreman. At 11:30 he retired to his private office to review some bills of lading. He was heard within, moving about. Finch paused, his throat working. At 12 o'clock his luncheon was brought to him by the office boy. He did not answer the boy's knock. Thinking him engrossed in his work, the boy entered. The office was empty. Holmes's eyes opened a fraction. The window? Locked from the inside. A stout sash window overlooking the river, but it was secured fast, as was the one giving onto the internal corridor. The only door to the room is that which the boy entered, and it opens directly into the main office, where 3 clerks were at their desks. All swear that Mr. Grayson did not pass them. He could not have done so without being seen. "A classic locked room mystery," I exclaimed, unable to contain my interest. "So it would seem, Watson," said Holmes, though his tone suggested a degree of scepticism. "What of the room itself, Mr. Finch? Were there any signs of a struggle? Any unusual object left behind?" "None whatsoever, Mr. Holmes." His overcoat and hat still hung upon the stand. His half-hunter watch was in his waistcoat pocket upon his desk chair. A cheque for a considerable sum, made out to him, lay openly upon the blotter. Nothing was disturbed. It was as if he had been spirited away. "And the river?" I ventured. "Could he have somehow—" "The window was locked, Doctor," Finch
reiterated, a note of despair in his voice, and we made a search of the wharf and the water. Our men dragged the area. Nothing was found. It is impossible, utterly impossible. Holmes had risen and was now staring out into the swirling fog, though I knew he saw none of it. His mind was turned inwards, examining the facts. "You have, of course, informed the police?" "Inspector Lestrade of Scotland Yard is investigating. He has questioned the staff, searched the premises and found nothing. He mutters about personal troubles and secret histories, implying that Theobald may have staged his own disappearance. But it is nonsense. He was a man of fortune, respected, with no entanglements of any kind. He would never abandon his business, his life, in such a fashion, and even if he wished to, how did he achieve it? Lestrade's theories are often a convenient substitute for evidence," Holmes remarked dryly. "There is more, I take it? You would not be so agitated by a mere disappearance, however perplexing. Something has occurred since our visitor seemed to shrink in his chair." "How could you know that?" "The mud on your trousers is of 2 distinct kinds," said Holmes without turning from the window. "The darker, clay-like substance is common around the dockside. The lighter, sandy soil upon your cuff is not. You have travelled from Wapping to another location this morning before coming here. Your agitation, which is fresh and keen, suggests the event that caused it happened not yesterday, but more recently. Tell us." A look of awe mixed with fear passed over Alistair Finch's face. "You are astonishing, sir." "Quite astonishing. This morning, upon returning to my home in Blackheath after a sleepless night, I found this pushed under my front door." He reached into his inner pocket and drew forth a small square card. With a trembling hand, he passed it to Holmes. I rose to look over my friend's shoulder. It was a plain visiting card of good quality stock. Upon it, no name was printed. Instead, drawn in a precise, delicate hand in dark ink, was a singular design. A row of 4 stick figures, their limbs arranged as if caught in a bizarre, static dance. Holmes took the card and held it close to his eyes, his entire being concentrated upon this strange missive. His nostrils flared slightly. "The dancing men," he whispered, and in his voice was a note I had come to recognize, the keen, sharp thrill of the hunter who has first glimpsed the spoor of his quarry. Holmes held the card as if it were a fragile and venomous insect, his keen eyes missing no detail of its construction. The paper is of superior quality, likely from Wiggins and Sons of the Strand. Note the faint watermark. The ink is India, not the common iron gall. This was drawn by a hand accustomed to precision, perhaps an architect or a draftsman, but the figures themselves. His voice trailed off into a thoughtful silence. "Good heavens, Holmes, what does it mean?" I asked, peering at the bizarre little figures. "Some childish prank?" "Our client does not seem to think so, Watson. Observe." He turned the card over. On the reverse, in the same precise hand, was a short message. "Cease your inquiries. He is beyond your reach." "A threat!" I exclaimed. "More than a threat, Watson." "A confirmation," Holmes said, his eyes gleaming with a cold light. "It confirms that Mr. Grayson's disappearance was not an accident nor a voluntary act. It was an abduction, engineered by a party who now feels sufficiently confident or sufficiently threatened by Mr. Finch's investigations to issue a warning." Mr. Finch moaned softly. "But who? And why? Our business dealings are straightforward. We have rivals, of course, but no enemies capable of such a thing. This drawing, it is madness." "On the contrary," Holmes countered, "it is remarkably sane. It is a calculated effort to intimidate while revealing nothing of the sender's identity. A printed note could be traced to a particular machine, a handwriting sample to an individual. This is a cipher, a most singular and arrogant cipher." He suddenly strode to his desk, seized a magnifying lens, and scrutinized the figures anew. 4 figures, each is distinct. The first holds its arms aloft. The second has one arm raised, one lowered. The third is similar but inverted. The fourth has its legs splayed. It is a code, Mr. Finch, a message within a message. "But what could it possibly say?" our client cried, his composure beginning to fracture under the strain. "That," said Holmes, laying the card carefully upon the blotter on his desk, "is the question that now occupies us. The what is secondary to the why. Why send a message in such a flamboyant and recognizable code? It is a signature as much as a warning. Our adversary is proud of his invention. He believes himself intellectually superior, untouchable. He is therefore vulnerable to his own vanity." He turned his piercing gaze back upon the trembling corn merchant. "You must tell me everything, Mr. Finch. Omit nothing, no matter how trivial it may seem. You say there are no business enemies. What of personal ones? What of Mr. Grayson himself, his habits, his associates, his past?" Finch passed a hand over his brow. "Theobald was a quiet man, sir, devoted to his work. He had few friends outside of our association. He is a member of his club, the Athenaeum, but attends infrequently. He has a passion for collecting rare books, particularly early editions on navigation and cartography. He is a philanthropist, contributing anonymously to several seafaring charities. A most respectable, decent man. His family, an orphan, no living relatives that I am aware of. That is why this suggestion of personal troubles is so absurd. And the business is sound? No recent significant losses? A large shipment gone astray? A debt called
in? "Business has never been better," Finch stated with conviction. "We have just finalized our most profitable quarter." The check on his desk was proof of that, a payment from the Baltic Exchange for a shipment of wheat that arrived without issue just last week. Holmes listened to this with an air of deep attention, his eyes half closed. "You mentioned the police searched the premises. Did they, or you, discover anything at all out of the ordinary in that room? Not a struggle, not an item missing, but an item added? Something that should not have been there?" Finch thought for a moment. Then his eyes widened. By Jove, now you mention it, there was one thing, a trifle really. When I was searching the room myself after the police had left, I found a small piece of chalk on the floor near the leg of his desk. I thought nothing of it. The cleaners are in at night. It could have come from any number of sources. Chalk, Holmes repeated, and the word hung in the air, charged with new significance. Of what colour? Why, white, Mr. Holmes. Ordinary white chalk. Show me the precise location on a plan of the room. Finch, looking bewildered, took the sheet of paper Holmes offered and with a pencil sketched a rough rectangle for the office, marking the position of the door, the windows and the desk. He made a small cross near one of the desk legs. Here, approximately here. Holmes studied the sketch for a moment, then nodded sharply, a decision made. Our path is clear. We must first examine the scene of the disappearance for ourselves. Lestrade's eyes are good, but they are not mine. Then we must pay a visit to your home in Blackheath, Mr. Finch, to see the exact point where this cryptic warning was delivered. And this, he tapped the card with the dancing men, this will be our constant companion. I feel that to understand these figures is to understand the mind of the man we seek. He swept into his bedroom, returning moments later, armed for the weather outside, his keen, eager face a stark contrast to the pallid anxiety of our client. Come, Watson, the game is afoot. We have a man who vanished from a locked room and a message from a dancing master. Let us see if we cannot introduce a more logical tune to the proceedings. The journey to Wapping was a silent and gloomy affair, our cab crawling through the suffocating fog as if through a world drowned in pea soup. The muffled cries of bargemen on the Thames and the occasional mournful blast of a ship's horn were the only sounds that penetrated our enclosed, damp little world. Alistair Finch sat hunched in his corner, wrestling with his fears, while Holmes sat perfectly still, his eyes closed and his fingertips pressed together, no doubt running over every minute fact of the case in the intricate workshop of his mind. The offices of Grayson and Finch were housed in a sturdy, brick-built warehouse that jutted out over the murky water of the Thames. The air inside
was thick with the dusty, sweet smell of grain. Clerks perched on high stools bent over their ledgers, casting nervous glances at our party as Mr. Finch led us through the main counting room towards a heavy oak door. "This is his office," Finch said, producing a key. "The police have given me leave to re-enter, though they saw nothing more to be gained here." Holmes did not reply. He took the key, unlocked the door, and stepped inside, his entire being transforming in an instant from the languid philosopher into the keen-nosed hound on the scent. It was a spacious, well-appointed room, dominated by a large mahogany desk facing the door. To the right, a large sash window offered a grey, fog-obscured view of the river and the bustling wharf below. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with ledgers and the volumes on navigation Finch had mentioned. A heavy overcoat and a bowler hat hung from a stand in the corner. The room felt not like a scene of a crime, but like a stage between acts, waiting for its principal player to return. "The window was found locked?" Holmes asked, his back to us, as he examined the fastening. "Yes, and the one giving onto the corridor," Finch confirmed, pointing to a smaller, frosted glass pane set high in the wall opposite the desk, designed for light and ventilation rather than egress. It, too, was securely latched. Holmes dropped to his knees by the desk, his lens appearing in his hand as if by magic. He scrutinized the carpet, the legs of the chair, the underside of the desk itself. He examined the position of the overcoat and the hat. He spent a long time at the window, paying particular attention to the catch and the sill, both inside and out, though the latter was accessible only by leaning precariously over a 20-foot drop to the cobbles below. "Lestrade was satisfied there was no forced entry?" he asked, without looking up. "Entirely." He concluded that if a crime had occurred, Mr. Grayson must have admitted his abductor himself, then been overpowered and somehow removed without anyone witnessing it. "A theory which demands the 3 clerks in the outer office were either blind, deaf, or complicit," Holmes murmured. "An unlikely trio of conspirators, I should think." His gaze fell upon the spot where Finch had indicated the piece of chalk was found. The carpet was a dark, practical Brussels, and Holmes's long fingers gently parted the fibres there. He held his lens over the spot for a full minute, his breath held in complete concentration. "There is a faint, dusty residue here, Watson," he said softly. "Almost invisible, but it is there. White, as Mr. Finch said." He straightened up, his eyes narrow slits of thought. "Mr. Finch, the piece of chalk itself. What became of it?" "I believe one of the policemen pocketed it, Mr. Holmes. Thought it nothing but a bit of rubbish. A pity. Its precise dimensions and make could have been instructive, but no matter." Holmes's attention was now caught by the bookshelves. He ran a finger along the spines, not reading the titles, but gauging the dust upon them. He stopped at a gap, a slot, where a large volume was clearly missing. The space on the shelf was clean, while its neighbours bore a fine layer of dust. "Was a book taken, Mr. Finch?" Holmes asked, his voice sharp. Finch came over and peered at the gap. "Why, yes." That is where Theobald kept his private logbook, a large folio-sized ledger he was most particular about. He made his own notes in it, shipping schedules, personal observations on the markets. He called it his memory. It is gone. Yet his valuable watch and a cheque were left upon the desk, Holmes mused. Our abductor, or abductors, were not common thieves. They came for the man, and they took this specific book. Why? He turned slowly on his heel, taking in the entire room once more. The locked windows, the guarded door, the missing man, the missing book, the chalk. He seemed to be piecing together a puzzle only he could see the shape of. His eyes alighted once more upon the high, frosted window that opened onto the internal corridor. He dragged the heavy desk chair beneath it, and standing upon it, examined the top of the frame and the simple latch with intense scrutiny. "Watson," he said, his voice suddenly charged with a new energy, "hand me my lens." I did so, and he peered at a specific point on the wooden frame, just above the latch. After a moment he gave a soft, satisfied grunt. "What is it, Holmes?" I asked. "A minute abrasion, my dear fellow. A tiny, fresh scratch upon the varnish, almost invisible." He jumped nimbly down from the chair, his eyes sparkling. "Mr. Finch, who has access to the corridor on the other side of this window?" "Why, everyone, Mr. Holmes." "It is a main thoroughfare to the loading bays. Labourers, clerks, foremen, all pass by throughout the day." "And the foreman?" Holmes pressed. "Is he a trusted man?" "Old Jed Cooper?" "He has been with us for 30 years. A most reliable fellow. I should like to speak with him. But discreetly. Is there a place where we might do so without causing a stir amongst the other employees?" Finch, looking more bewildered than ever by this line of inquiry, led us out through a side door and into a small, chilly storeroom filled with sample sacks of grain. He sent a boy to fetch the foreman, and presently a large, grizzled man with a weathered face and hands like shovels entered, clutching his cap nervously. "You wanted to see me, sir?" he said, addressing Finch. "A few questions, Mr. Cooper, if you please," Holmes interjected smoothly. "You were on duty the morning Mr. Grayson disappeared?" "I were, sir." "Did you see or hear anything unusual?" "Anything at all?" The man shook his head. "No, sir." Just the usual noise of the docks. Holmes's manner was deceptively casual. I understand the men are sometimes required to mark sacks or crates. Do you keep a supply of chalk for that purpose? Aye, sir, that we do. There's a box of it on my desk out there. And was any chalk missing from that box yesterday? The foreman looked surprised. Now you mention it, sir, yes. I needed a piece after luncheon and found the box empty. I thought one of the lads had used the last of it and forgotten to tell me. I meant to get more from the store. Holmes's expression did not change, but I saw the faint tightening of the muscles around his jaw, a sign I knew well that he had connected two seemingly disparate facts. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. You have been most helpful. When the foreman had left, Finch turned to Holmes, his face a mask of confusion. Chalk, Mr. Holmes? What can the foreman's chalk possibly have to do with Theobald's disappearance? It has everything to do with it, Holmes replied, his voice low and intent. The chalk found in Mr. Grayson's office did not come from a cleaner. It came from your foreman's box. It was used to commit this impossible crime. And that tiny scratch on the window frame is the mark of the tool that engineered it. The locked room is solved, Mr. Finch, but the greater mystery, the why and the who and the dreadful meaning of these dancing men, has only just begun. Finch stared at Holmes, his mouth agape. Solved? But how? The method, not the motive, Holmes corrected, his voice brisk as he led us back into the main office. The how is often mere mechanics, the why is the soul of the crime. But let us not get ahead of ourselves. The chalk and the scratch upon the window frame are the keys. Observe, he pointed to the high frosted pane. The latch is a simple, swiveling brass hook. From this side, it is easily reached. From the corridor side, it is inaccessible unless one has a tool. A tool coated in chalk, I followed his reasoning. The chalk was used to mark the tool. But why? Not to mark it, Watson, but to silence it. Imagine a thin, rigid piece of wire, or perhaps a stiff whalebone, inserted between the sashes from the outside. The end is coated in wet chalk, a sticky, temporary adhesive. This end is carefully pressed against the latch. A deft twist and push from the corridor, and the latch is turned, the window unlocked, all without a sound. The chalk muffles any metallic scrape. The wielder of this tool then quietly opens the window, enters the room, and overpowers Theobald, Finch finished, a spark of horrified understanding in his eyes. Precisely. But then the abductor is in a room with an unconscious or restrained man, and the only exit is through a door that opens into an office full of clerks. An impossible situation remains, unless... Holmes's eyes swept the room again, landing on the heavy, floor-length curtains that flanked the main river window. Unless the exit was not through the door. He strode to the window and threw back the curtain. The large sash window was closed and locked as before. But Holmes's attention was not on the window itself, but on the broad, polished oak ledge that served as the interior sill. He leaned forward, his lens once more in hand, examining the surface where the dust had settled. There, he whispered, pointing to two faint parallel scuff marks in the dust, leading from the center of the sill to the edge. Not a heavy weight, but a weight nonetheless. And observed the cobbles below. We all peered through the foggy pane. The wharf was 20 feet down, a sheer drop onto unyielding stone. No man could survive that with a burden, I stated. No living man, Holmes replied, his voice grim. But a sack of grain, a bale of wool, things are lowered from these warehouses every day. A rope, secured to a hook, perhaps that sturdy curtain rod bracket, would be all that is required. The abductor enters from the corridor window, subdues Mr. Grayson, trusses him up, and lowers him to a confederate waiting on a cart or a barge below, perfectly camouflaged amidst the constant comings and goings of the wharf. The rope is pulled up, the window relatched using the same chalk-smeared tool from the inside, leaving nothing but a piece of fallen chalk and two almost invisible scuff marks as evidence of the entire audacious operation. Finch sank onto the hard wooden chair by the desk, his face ashen. It is monstrous, but it is brilliant. You have seen what the police could not. Lestrade looks for a man, not a method, said Holmes with a touch of asperity, but we are not yet done. The missing logbook. It was not taken by the abductor during this frantic operation. It was taken after he pointed to the clean space on the dusty shelf. The book was removed carefully, deliberately, once the room was empty, by someone who had no need to rush, who had every right to be here. One of the clerks, I suggested. Or the foreman, Finch breathed, a new dread in his voice. Or another, entirely, Holmes said. Someone who knew the book was here and seized the opportunity the crime presented to acquire it. This suggests two parties, one who takes the man and another who seeks the information in that book. Or perhaps one party with two objectives. The dancing men warned you to cease your inquiries, Mr. Finch. They said he was beyond your reach. They said nothing of the book. The sheer complexity of the case was dizzying. A locked room mystery solved, only to reveal a deeper layer of deception and competing motives. "We must go to Blackheath," Holmes announced abruptly. "We must see where this warning was left. The public house where we left our cab will have pen and paper. I wish to make a precise copy of these infernal figures. Before we subject the original to the hazards of travel, we left the oppressive atmosphere of the warehouse and found a quiet table in the corner of a nearby tavern. Holmes, with the concentration of a master cartographer, reproduced the four dancing men on a sheet of tavern bill paper, capturing every nuance of their absurd poses. He studied his copy for a long moment, his brows knitted in thought. "They are not random," he muttered, more to himself than to us. "There is a pattern, a grammar to their absurdity. The first and the third figures are similar but mirrored. The second and fourth are unique. It is a language, Watson, a primitive yet cunningly constructed language." He tucked the copy into his pocket and carefully returned the original card to Mr. Finch. We then embarked on the long, fog-shrouded journey to the genteel suburb of Blackheath. Finch's home was a handsome villa, set back from the road behind a well-tended garden. The fog was thinner here, lingering in the hollows of the lawn like spectral pools. Finch's housekeeper, a flustered woman named Mrs. Porter, showed us to the front door, a solid piece of oak with a brass letterbox. "It was just there, sir," Finch said, pointing to the mat. "Pushed part way underneath." Holmes went down on his knees like a praying mendicant. He examined the mat, the gap under the door, the brass fittings, and the surrounding stone step. He produced his lens again and scrutinized the area with an intensity that seemed to will the very stones to speak. "The fog was thick this morning," he murmured. "Excellent for obscuring one's approach. The ground is too damp and trampled to yield a clear footprint." He rose and turned his attention to the street, his eyes scanning the quiet, respectable avenue. His gaze fixed upon a particular spot on the road, some 10 yards from the gate. He walked over to it, we following behind. There, hardened in the damp earth of the road, was the clear, fresh impression of a horseshoe. "A cab," Holmes said, "waiting here." Not a hansom with its central position, but a four-wheeler, a growler. See the spacing? The driver did not alight. His passenger did. The passenger who delivered the message walked to the house and back. and he was in a hurry or agitated, Holmes pointed to a set of footprints leading from the gate to the road. The stride is long. The heel is dug in deeply. This was no casual delivery. He turned back to Finch, his expression grave. Your enemy, Mr. Finch, is not a phantom. He is a man of resources who employs others to do his bidding. He knows your business, he knows your home, and he has a theatrical, arrogant pride in his own cleverness. The dancing men are his signature. And I fear... He paused, his sharp eyes narrowing. I fear he is only just beginning his performance. Back inside the relative warmth of the villa's drawing room, Holmes seemed to vibrate with a new and focused energy. The quiet domesticity of the surroundings, the chintz armchairs, the watercolours of the Lake District, the well-polished rosewood piano, stood in stark contrast to the malevolent puzzle we were unravelling. Our client, Alistair Finch, sank into an armchair, looking as if the foundations of his orderly world had been pulled from beneath him. He knows my home, Finch repeated, his voice hollow. He stood at my very door. Knowledge is his weapon, Holmes stated, his back to us as he stood before the fireplace, examining the dancing men card he had laid upon the mantelpiece. And this code is his chosen medium. Its arrogance is its weakness. He believes himself intellectually untouchable, communicating in a language only he understands. It is a challenge, Watson. A direct challenge to any mind that would oppose him. He turned, his eyes alight with the pure joy of the intellectual contest. The police look for a man. We must look for a mind. And here, he tapped the card, is the mind's first utterance. 4 figures. We must assume they represent letters. The most common letter in the English language is E. Let us see if any figure repeats in a way that might suggest this. He produced his copy from his pocket and laid it beside the original. The first and the third figures are similar but not identical. The first has both arms raised. The third has one arm raised and one lowered, a mirror image. They are not the same. The second figure has one arm up, one down. The fourth has its legs splayed wide. All are unique. Therefore, we are not looking for a repeated perhaps it is a word of 4 letters, I suggested. A distinct possibility, Holmes agreed. A warning. Stop. Cease. Halt. Beware. Let us test H-A-L-T. If H is the first figure, A the second, L the third, T the fourth. He scribbled the letters beneath the corresponding figures, but this tells us nothing. We have no other sample to cross-reference. We must look at the context. The message was a warning to cease inquiry. The word stop is 4 letters, but stop has a repeated letter, Finch pointed out, his business mind engaging with the problem despite his fear. The P would be the same symbol, would it not? Precisely, Mr. Finch. You see the flaw. Our 4 figures are all different. Therefore, the word, if it is one, must consist of 4 unique letters. Cease has a repeated E. Halt has unique letters. Quit has unique letters. Desist is too long. We are guessing in the dark. Holmes paced before the fire, his hands clasped behind his back. No, we must be more scientific. We must consider the man. This is a performance. The villain did not need to send a code. He could have sent a plain threat. He chose the code to demonstrate his cleverness, to belittle Mr. Finch, and to... He stopped, dead. His head snapped towards the card on the mantelpiece. To sign his work... He strode back to it, his finger stabbing at the first figure, the man with both arms raised. What if this is not part of the message? What if it is the signature? The mark of the author? A man who draws such a figure might well use it to represent himself, a capital 1, I ventured. for the ego of the man? Or a T for a name, Finch added, caught up in Holmes's excitement. Possibly, Holmes murmured, his eyes fixed on the remaining 3 figures. That would leave us with 3 symbols for the message. Cease is 5 letters. Stop is 4. End is 3. He fell silent, his mind racing. Then he let out a sharp, triumphant breath. But the written message is not 3 words, it is 4. Cease your inquiries. Too long. The code is not for the entire message. The code is the message. The written words are a translation, a taunt. He grabbed his copy and a pencil from his pocket. Assume the first figure is the signature. The following 3 figures then spell a single word, a short, powerful word of command, a word of 3 letters with unique characters. What is the most commanding 3-letter word in the English language? End, I said. Run, offered Finch. Holmes shook his head, a smile playing on his thin lips. No, think of a command given to a dog, to a subordinate, a word that brooks no argument. A cold dread touched my spine. Die, I whispered. The room seemed to grow colder. Holmes's smile was grim. Exactly, Watson. D-I-E, 3 unique letters. Let us apply it. Assume the second figure represents D, the third, I, the fourth, E. He wrote the letters beneath the figures, but this is conjecture. We need confirmation. Confirmation? How can we possibly get that? Finch cried, aghast at the decoded threat. From the only other source available, Holmes said, his voice low and intense, the man who drew it. He will have grown confident. He will be eager to see if his challenge has been met. If his work is appreciated, he will be watching. He turned to our host. Mr. Finch, you must follow my instructions exactly. You will appear to capitulate. You will do nothing to suggest you are continuing your inquiries. You will go to your club. You will speak of your distress. You will be the picture of a broken man. Meanwhile, Watson and I will be engaged elsewhere. Where? I asked. Where the key to this puzzle lies, he replied, not in the airy drawing rooms of Blackheath, but in the dusty ledgers of the shipping trade. Our villain did not just take a man, he took a book, a logbook filled with personal observations on the markets. What if Mr. Grayson's observations were too personal? What if he had deduced something he was not meant to know, something worth kidnapping him and stealing his private ledger to confirm? He began to pace again, his deductions flowing now like a swift river. The chalk came from the docks. The method of escape utilized the wharf. The villain has an intimate knowledge of Mr. Finch's business and his home. This is no external enemy. This is a canker within the world of Grayson and Finch itself. A rival merchant, perhaps, who felt threatened by their success. Or, he paused, his eyes narrowing, a partner who desired more than his share. Finch shot to his feet, his face flushed with indignation. Mr. Holmes, I assure you. I do not accuse you, Mr. Finch, Holmes said calmly, though his gaze was piercing. I accuse the circumstances. But we must look at every angle. The business is sound, you say, profitable, but such success can breed jealousy. It can also mask deception. I must examine your business records, Mr. Finch. Not the public ledgers, but the private correspondence, the contracts, the shipping manifests for the last 6 months. I must look for the shadow that should not be there. The indignation faded from Finch's face, replaced by a dawning horror. You believe Theobald discovered some fraud, some scheme? I believe, said Holmes, gathering his coat, that a man does not vanish from a locked room and be replaced by a cryptic death threat over a simple misunderstanding. The scale of the crime demands a proportionally grand motive. And in my experience, Watson, he said, turning to me with a grim finality, when a successful businessman is targeted with such precision, the motive is invariably to be found in the account books. The dancing men are the flourish. The numbers will be the murder weapon. The following hours were spent in the musty, paper-filled sanctum of Alistair Finch's private study at the Blackheath Villa. Ledgers, bills of lading and correspondence were piled high on the desk, as Holmes, with the relentless efficiency of a machine, sifted through the commercial history of Grayson and Finch. Finch himself, pale and anxious, sat in a corner answering Holmes's rapid-fire questions regarding suppliers, buyers and shipping routes, while I did my best to assist by organizing documents as Holmes discarded them. Holmes's method was breathtaking to behold. He did not read each page so much as consume it, his eyes flicking down columns of figures with a speed that defied belief, his fingers tracing an entry here, a date there, cross-referencing with other volumes with an uncanny sense of where to look. "The profit is here, Watson," he muttered, not looking up from a sprawling account book. "But it is too consistent. The grain trade is subject to the vagaries of weather, war, and chance. Yet for the past 8 months, Grayson and Finch have seen a steady, unvarying margin on every major shipment from the Baltic. It is as if they have a perfect foreknowledge of market fluctuations. Theobald was a brilliant man of business," Finch offered, though he sounded unsure. "No man is this brilliant," Holmes retorted. "It suggests not foresight, but manipulation." He pulled another ledger towards him, this one older and more worn. "These are your records from last year. See the variations? A loss here on Russian wheat due to an early frost. A windfall here on Canadian barley, the natural chaos of commerce." He slapped the current ledger. "This is not chaos. This is a carefully composed symphony. The question is, who is the conductor?" He worked in silence for another 20 minutes, the only sounds the rustle of paper and the ticking of the mantel clock. Then he froze. His body, which had been a model of constant, focused motion, became utterly still. It was the stillness of a pointer catching a scent. "Mr. Finch," he said, his voice dangerously calm, "the shipment of wheat from Riga, the one for which you received the cheque found on Mr. Grayson's desk, the SS Pomerania, yes? A most successful venture. According to the bill of lading, the Pomerania docked on the 17th and was unloaded on the 18th. The cheque from the Baltic Exchange is dated the 18th. Payment upon confirmed delivery, standard practice." Holmes's eyes were like chips of flint as he looked up. "I have here a copy of Lloyd's List, the shipping news. It reports the SS Pomerania was delayed off the score by contrary winds. It did not make berth in London until the evening of the 19th. A profound silence filled the room. Finch stared, uncomprehending. That cannot be. The grain was sold, the payment was made." "The grain was sold and paid for," Holmes said softly, "a full day before it officially arrived in the country." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Tell me, Mr. Finch, who handled the negotiation and sale of that shipment?" Finch's face had lost all its colour. "Why, Theobald did. It was his particular triumph. He secured a price far above the market rate. He said he had a private understanding with the buyers." "A private understanding?" Holmes repeated, the words dripping with significance. He began to pull more ledgers, more contracts. His movements were now feverish, his deductions coming almost too fast for me to follow. "The Pomerania is not an isolated case. Here, the barley from Odessa, paid for on the 3rd, though the ship logged its arrival on the 5th. The rye from Danzig, the same pattern. A consistent, impossible pattern of preemptive sales at premium prices." He slammed the ledger shut. "Your partner, Mr. Finch, was not a commercial genius. He was a fraudster. He was selling grain that had not yet arrived at prices he himself was likely manipulating, using false information about shipments and yields. He was building a house of cards, a Ponzi scheme of enormous complexity, paying off old investors with money from new ones, but such schemes always collapse. He must have realized the end was near. He must have been threatened by his co-conspirators, or a new, more terrible thought seemed to strike him. Or he was not the mastermind. He was the puppet, and the man pulling the strings decided the puppet had outlived its usefulness. Finch looked as if he might be sick. Theobald, a criminal? I cannot believe it. The evidence is irrefutable, Holmes stated coldly. The numbers do not lie. But this revelation does not simplify our case. It deepens it immeasurably. We are no longer looking for a simple abductor. We are looking for a confederate or a victim. The man who delivered the threat, the author of the dancing men, he knows of the fraud. He is either a partner in the crime, eliminating a loose end, or he was interrupted by a frantic knocking at the front door. We heard the murmur of Mrs. Porter's voice, then hurried footsteps in the hall. The study door flew open to reveal Inspector Lestrade, his usual cockiness replaced by a grave and urgent anxiety. "Holmes! Thank God I found you. I went to Baker Street, and your landlady said you'd come here with Mr. Finch." His eyes darted around the paper-strewn room. "There's been a development." "A dreadful development." "What is it, Lestrade?" Holmes asked, though from his expression I sensed he already anticipated the news. "It's about the foreman from the docks, Jed Cooper." "What of him?" Lestrade swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "He was found an hour ago in an alleyway off Wapping High Street. His throat was cut, and pinned to his coat with his own whittling knife was a piece of paper. He held out a small square card. Upon it, drawn in the same precise hand, was another row of the sinister stick figures. This time there were 5 of them. The first 4 were identical to those on the first message. A 5th figure had been added, its limbs contorted into a final grotesque pose of collapse. Holmes took the card, his face a mask of grim fury. He looked from the new message to his own copy of the first, his mind making the connection with terrifying speed. "The signature," he whispered, pointing to the first figure on the new card, the man with both arms raised. "And the word." "We were right, Watson. The 2nd, 3rd, and 4th figures, D.I. His finger moved to the new 5th figure, the one of tragic collapse. "And this is the full stop." He looked up, his eyes burning with a cold fire. "The first message was a warning. This, Inspector, is a report. The author of the Dancing Men isn't just taunting us. He is chronicling his work. And he has just informed us that he has silenced Jed Cooper permanently." The foreman didn't just lose his chalk, Lestrade. He saw something he shouldn't have, and now he has paid for it with his life. The grim finality of the 5th dancing figure hung in the study like a shroud. Lestrade, for once, was utterly devoid of his usual bluster, his face ashen as he comprehended the full horror of the message he had delivered. Alistair Finch looked as though the world had dissolved beneath his feet, his trusted partner a fraudster, his faithful foreman brutally slain. "Cooper," Finch whispered, sinking back into his chair. "A good man. A family man. Why?" "Because he was a tool that had become a liability," Holmes said, his voice cold and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. He was already moving, snatching up his coat. The chalk was the key that unlocked the room. Cooper's chalk. He either gave it willingly under some pretext, or it was taken from his box without his knowledge, but after the fact he must have realized its significance. He knew who had taken it. He may have even been threatened or paid for his silence. But our villain, this author of Dancing Men, is a perfectionist. He does not leave loose ends. Cooper's knowledge, however fragmentary, was a risk, and so he has been permanently silenced. He turned to Lestrade, his manner brusque and commanding. "Inspector, you will return to the scene of Cooper's murder. I want to know everything about that alleyway. Every footprint, every discarded item, the testimony of the last person to see him alive. Most importantly, I want to know the exact time of death." "The police surgeon put it at around noon," Lestrade said, fumbling for his notebook. "Noon," Holmes repeated, his eyes narrowing. "And this card was delivered to Mr. Finch's door this morning. Our villain is not merely clever, he is efficient. He moves from threat to execution with terrifying speed. He is working to a timetable." He spun to face Finch. "The business. You must return to the offices at once, act normally, grieve for your partner, express horror at the news of Cooper, but do nothing to suggest you suspect the fraud. The author of these messages will be watching, and he must believe his intimidation has worked." "And what will you do, Holmes?" I asked, my own mind reeling from the rapid, dark turn of events. "I will do what I should have done the moment I understood the method of the abduction," he stated. "I underestimated our adversary. I saw the mechanics of the crime, but not the ruthless mind behind it. I will re-examine the stage of this tragedy with this new understanding. The office of Grayson and Finch. There is a truth there that I missed, Watson, a truth written not in chalk, but in the very dust of the place. Come." We left a shell-shocked Finch in the care of his housekeeper and followed Lestrade back into the fog, which was now deepening with the approaching evening. The journey back to Wapping was a sombre one, the spectre of Jed Cooper's murder lying heavily upon us. The taverns and alleys we passed seemed to hold a new menace, each shadow a potential hiding place for the ruthless creator of the dancing men. The offices were closed and shrouded in darkness when we arrived, the bustling commerce of the day replaced by an eerie quiet. Lestrade secured a key from a nervous night watchman, and we entered the cavernous, silent warehouse. The gas lamps were lit, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to mock us with their mimicry of the deadly figures on the card. Holmes went straight to Theobald Grayson's office, but he did not enter immediately. Instead, he walked past it. Down the corridor from which the high window had been manipulated, he stopped at a door marked Foreman. "Cooper's office?" Lestrade said, unlocking it. It was a small, cluttered room, smelling of tobacco and sawdust. Plans for loading cargo were pinned to a board, and on the desk sat the now notorious empty chalk box. Holmes ignored everything else and went straight to the desk, pulling open the drawers with his gloved hands. "He was a whittler, you said?" Holmes asked, noting the shavings in the waste-paper basket and the sharp, well-worn knife sheathed beside the inkwell. "Aye," said the night watchman, hovering at the door. "Always had a bit of wood in his hands, did Jed. Made toys for his kids." Holmes's fingers, probing the back of the deepest drawer, closed on something. He drew out a small, crudely carved wooden figure. It was a stick man, its limbs awkwardly splayed. It was not a skilled piece of work, but its intention was horrifyingly clear. "He was trying to understand them," Holmes murmured, holding the figure up to the light. He saw the card that was delivered to Finch. Or perhaps he saw another. He was trying to carve them, to comprehend their meaning. This was not the work of a man complicit in the plot. This was the work of a frightened man trying to puzzle out a threat. He pocketed the little carving, his face grim. He knew something was wrong, and his attempt to understand it cost him his life. We moved back into the corridor. Holmes positioned himself beneath the high window that opened into Grayson's office. He measured the height with his eye, then looked down the corridor towards the main warehouse floor. The abductor needed time, he mused. "Time to enter, subdue Grayson, lower him from the window, and relock it from the inside. Several minutes at least. He would need a lookout. Someone to ensure he was not disturbed. His gaze fell upon a large stack of empty grain sacks piled high against the wall, some 20 feet from Grayson's door. The perfect hiding place. He strode over to the sacks and dropped to his knees, ignoring the dust. He pulled out his lens and examined the floorboards. After a moment, he gave a soft, triumphant exclamation. "Look here, Watson." Lestrade. We joined him. In the gap between the floorboards, almost invisible, was a single, short, white hair. Next to it, a tiny scatter of sawdust. "The watchman mentioned a dog," Holmes said, his eyes gleaming. "A terrier that Cooper doted on. It sometimes accompanied him to work. But what of it?" Lestrade asked, bewildered. "This is not dog hair," Holmes said, carefully retrieving the evidence with a pair of tweezers. "It is too coarse. It is horsehair. From a rug, or perhaps a carriage seat." He then pointed to the sawdust. "And this is not from Cooper's whittling. It is too fine, too uniform. It is the sawdust used by upholsterers." He stood up, his mind racing, connecting these minuscule clues to the larger picture. The lookout did not stand here. He sat here, hidden by these sacks, for some time. He was a man of some means, accustomed to carriages, who dropped this from his clothing. Or... His eyes widened with a sudden, stunning realization. Or it was not a he at all. He turned and almost ran back into Grayson's office, heading straight for the chair where Grayson's overcoat still hung. He thrust his hand into the pockets, pulling out a handkerchief, a few coins, and a folded theatre programme. He ignored these and instead brought the coat itself to his nose, inhaling deeply. "I am a fool, Watson," he cried. "A blind, unimaginative fool. I was so preoccupied with the chalk and the windows that I ignored the most elementary clue of all." "What is it, Holmes?" I asked, utterly lost. "The scent," he said, his voice electric with excitement. "When we first entered this room, the air was stale, dusty. But beneath that there was another scent, faint but unmistakable. I attributed it to the river fog, but it was contained within this room. I smell it now on this coat, a scent Grayson himself would not have worn." He thrust the lapel towards me. I caught a faint, elegant fragrance, a complex bouquet of jasmine and sandalwood. "Perfume, Watson," Holmes announced, his eyes burning with a fierce light. "An expensive, distinctly feminine perfume. Our abductor did not work alone. He had an accomplice. The lookout who sat waiting by the grain sacks was not a dock worker. It was a woman. The revelation hung in the dusty air of the office, as startling and disruptive as a pistol shot. Lestrade gaped, his mouth working soundlessly. I myself was struck dumb by the implication. A woman. The ruthless architect of this plot, the author of these grim, dancing threats, had a woman at his side. "A woman?" Lestrade finally spluttered. "Involved in a brutal kidnapping and murder? It's not decent, Holmes." "Evil is rarely concerned with propriety, Inspector," Holmes snapped, his mind already racing ahead. "The perfume is key. It is not a common scent. It is complex, sophisticated. Jardin de la Nuit, by Maison Duvier, a French house, exclusive and prohibitively expensive, a clientele of aristocrats and the nouveau riche. Our lady accomplice moves in elevated circles or wishes to appear as. If she does," he brought the coat to his nose once more, "a connoisseur of a vile vintage. And it is recent. Applied within the last day or two. She was here. She stood in this very room, close enough to Mr. Grayson for her scent to transfer to his coat." He began to pace, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into a new, darker configuration. "The fraud. the impossible profits, the premium prices. It was not just a financial scheme, it was a performance. A performance for whom? For the partners, to keep them complacent, or for an outside investor, lured by the promise of miraculous returns? A woman of expensive tastes, connected to a criminal genius. She would be a perfect lure for such a scheme. A siren song of guaranteed wealth. He stopped and turned his piercing gaze on me. Watson. The theatre programme from Grayson's pocket. I handed it to him. It was for a performance of Les Cloches de Corneville at the Savoy Theatre 2 nights before his disappearance. A light opera, popular with a certain set, Holmes murmured. And here, tucked within the pages, with a delicate touch, he extracted not a ticket stub, but a small pressed flower, a violet, and a single elegant hairpin crafted from tortoise shell and mother of pearl. A sentimental keepsake, I observed. Or a trophy, Holmes countered, his voice grim. The flower, perhaps a token from an admirer. The hairpin accidentally dropped and kept the signs of a rendezvous. Mr. Grayson, the confirmed bachelor, had a secret life. A romantic entanglement. The image was forming, terrible and clear. The respectable, quiet businessman, seduced by a beautiful woman who represented a world of glamour and excitement far from his dusty ledgers. She and the shadowy figure behind her, the author of The Dancing Men, had ensnared him, using his position and reputation to build a vast, fraudulent enterprise. And when the scheme threatened to collapse, I said, the horror dawning on me. Or when Grayson developed a conscience, they turned on him. Precisely, Holmes said. They could not simply kill him. His sudden death would trigger an audit exposing the fraud. They needed him to disappear, to vanish, leaving behind a mystery that would baffle the police and discredit him. The locked room was not just a method, it was a message. It painted Grayson as either a victim of the impossible or a perpetrator of it, and the theft of his private logbook was to ensure they had all the records of their illicit dealings. He snatched up his copy of the Dancing Men Code, his eyes alight. And this is the final piece of the arrogance. The villain does not just communicate, he boasts, he documents his own cleverness. The first message to Finch, the second announcing Cooper's death. He is writing a narrative of his own invincibility. He strode out of the office, back towards the foreman's room, we following in his wake. He pointed to the tiny horsehair and upholsterer's sawdust. Our lady accomplice did not arrive on foot. She came in a carriage, a private carriage, well appointed. She waited here, hidden, while her confederate, the dancing man himself, executed the abduction. She is the link, Watson, the human flaw in their otherwise perfect plan. Vanity. She wore her distinctive perfume to a criminal undertaking. Lestrade, though shaken, was now galvanized. I'll have men scour the cab stands and livery stables for a mile around. Someone must have seen a private carriage waiting that morning. Do it discreetly, Lestrade, Holmes warned. Our adversaries are watching. They have already killed twice to protect their secret. They will not hesitate to do so again. He turned to me, his expression resolute. Watson, our path is clear. We must follow the scent, both literal and metaphorical. The world of expensive perfumes is a small one. We must pay a visit to the sole London agent for Maison Duvier, and we must also look closer to home. Mr. Finch spoke of Grayson's philanthropy, his donations to seafaring charities. I wonder if his generosity extended to a certain actress or a society beauty with a taste for French perfume and financial speculation. He paused at the door of the warehouse, looking out at the swirling fog that cloaked the river, a perfect shroud for unseen movements and whispered conspiracies. We are hunting a phantom, Watson, he said, his voice low. a man who communicates in a childish code and murders with cold efficiency. But his partner, his silent accomplice, she has left us a trail of scent and vanity. And it is a trail that will lead us directly into the heart of this dance of death. The following morning found us in the refined confines of Mayfair, a world away from the gritty wharves of Wapping. The fog had lifted, replaced by a pale, weak sunlight that did little to dispel the chill of the case that gripped us. The establishment of Messrs. Fortnum and Mason, purveyors of the finest goods to the aristocracy, housed the exclusive counter for Maison Duvier. The air within was thick with the cloying mélange of 100 different perfumes, soaps and potpourris. Holmes, with his hawk-like features and intense demeanour, seemed as out of place as a wolf in a drawing room. He approached a severe-looking woman behind the counter, whose expression suggested she was accustomed to judging a customer's worth by the cut of their coat. "Good morning," Holmes began, his tone deceptively light. "I wish to make an inquiry regarding Jardin de la Nuit." The woman's eyebrows rose a fraction. "A particular choice, sir. A complex fragrance, not for the unadventurous. Indeed, I am endeavouring to trace a bottle purchased recently. It would have been within the last fortnight." She gave a thin, dismissive smile. "Sir, we value the discretion of our clientele. We do not divulge their purchasing habits." Holmes did not press. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a confidential murmur. "I understand completely. Perhaps you could then assist me with a related matter of taste. The lady in question also has a fondness for the Savoy Theatre. I am seeking a gift that would complement both her olfactory and theatrical preferences. A harmonious gesture?" It was a masterful stroke. He had not asked for a name directly, but had provided two specific, intersecting points of data, the perfume and the theatre, framed as a question of taste. The woman's professional pride was engaged. She would either know of such a person, or she would not. Her severe expression softened into one of contemplation. "The Savoy? Let me see. We have several patrons who favour the Gilbert and Sullivan productions. Lady Worthington, Mrs. de Courcy." She tapped a finger against her chin. "There is one, a foreign lady, a regular client for Jardin de la Nuit. She mentioned a box at the Savoy just last week. A Russian lady, I believe. Married to a gentleman in the shipping trade." Mr. Ivanov, Holmes's body was perfectly still, but I saw the faint tremor of excitement in his hand as he rested it on the counter. "Ivanov," he repeated as if trying the name for weight. "And her first name?" "I really couldn't say, sir. We have her account under her husband's name. They have a residence in Bayswater, a large house on Moscow Road. You have been most helpful," Holmes said, with a short, sharp bow. He turned and swept out of the shop, I following close behind. "Ivanov," I breathed as we hailed a cab. "Shipping trade." "It fits perfectly, Holmes. He would have the knowledge to manipulate grain shipments, to create the fraudulent schedules." "And a Russian wife with expensive tastes to maintain," Holmes added, his eyes gleaming. "A wife who could serve as the perfect lure for a lonely, respectable businessman like Theobald Grayson. The pieces converge, Watson. The fraud, the abduction, the perfume. They all lead to Bayswater." The house on Moscow Road was a large, slightly oppressive villa, set back behind a high wall and a screen of laurel bushes. It spoke of new money and a desire for privacy. As our cab drew up, Holmes did not instruct the driver to stop. Instead, we rolled past at a steady pace, Holmes's keen eyes missing no detail. The well-kept garden, the fresh paint on the window frames, the single, bored-looking footman polishing the brass door fittings. "Circulate, driver," Holmes instructed. "Take us around the block." As we turned the corner, Holmes's attention was caught by a tradesman's cart parked a few doors down. A man was delivering a case of wine to a neighbouring house. Holmes rapped sharply on the roof of the cab, and we jerked to a halt. "Wait here!" he commanded, and before I could ask a question, he had alighted and was striding towards the carter with an air of officious authority. "You there?" "A moment, if you please," Holmes called out, adopting a tone I recognized as his impression of a minor government functionary. "I am making inquiries regarding the household of number 42, the Ivanovs. Have you made deliveries to that address?" The carter, a burly fellow, looked surprised but nodded. "Aye, sir. Once a month, a case of that expensive French champagne. Never seen a household get through so much of the stuff." "And the lady of the house? Would you know her?" "Seen her once or twice taking the air in a carriage." "A looker, she is, foreign, dark hair, fancy clothes," he grinned. "Likes the bubbly, that one." Holmes thanked the man with a brusque nod and returned to the cab, his face alight with triumph. "The final confirmation, Watson. The champagne complements the perfume. We have our siren." He directed the cabby to a quiet tea shop a few streets away, where we took a table by the window with a view of the comings and goings on Moscow Road. Holmes was silent for some time, his fingers steepled, his gaze distant. "We have them, Watson," he said at last. "We have the players. Ivanov, the shipping magnate and criminal mastermind, his wife, the accomplice and lure. But we lack the final irrefutable proof. We need the logbook. We need to link them directly to the abduction and to Cooper's murder. A forced entry would be futile. They would simply deny everything." "Then what is our course?" I asked. "We must make them believe they are still safe," he said, a familiar, predatory smile touching his lips. "We must make them overconfident. Mr. Finch must play his part. He must be seen to be broken, withdrawing from his business affairs, and we must provide them with a new target, a piece of bait they cannot resist." "Bait?" "Themselves," Holmes said, his eyes narrowing. "Their own arrogance. The author of The Dancing Men cannot resist an audience for his work. He has chronicled his actions thus far. I propose we give him a reason to send another message, one that will trap him utterly." He took out his notebook and began to write, his hand moving swiftly. "We will place a notice in the agony column of the Times, a response to his challenge, a message he alone will understand." He showed me what he had written. It was a short, simple notice. "D.M. The dance is understood. A meeting is sought. F. Finch," replying to the Dancing Men, I murmured, understanding dawning. "You think he will respond?" "I am counting on it," Holmes said, his voice cold and hard. "His vanity will demand it. He will not be able to resist engaging in his own cryptic language. He will see it as a final victory, acknowledgement of his superiority, and when he does, he will lead us not only to himself but to the evidence we need to seal his fate. The game, Watson, is entering its final act." The next 36 hours were a lesson in excruciating tension. The notice appeared in The Times. Alistair Finch, coached meticulously by Holmes, played his part to the letter, withdrawing to his Blackheath villa, and appearing, through carefully staged sightings by the servants, to be a man shattered by grief and fear. Holmes, meanwhile, was a caged tiger prowling our sitting room at Baker Street, his violin silent, his energy devoted to the study of his copy of The Dancing Men, as if by sheer force of will he could divine the mind of their creator. I found myself jumping at every knock at the door, every cry from the street. Our adversary had proven himself ruthless and efficient. Would he see the message as a taunt, a trap, or, as Holmes predicted, an irresistible invitation to gloat? The answer came on the second evening, as Mrs. Hudson brought up the Evening Post, Among the bills and circulars was a thick, expensive-looking envelope addressed in a sharp, angular hand to Mr. Alistair Finch, care of our Baker Street address. There was no postmark. It had been delivered by hand. Holmes took it as if it were a live explosive. He carried it to his desk, using a penknife to slit the envelope with surgical precision. He withdrew a single sheet of heavy cream paper. Upon it, drawn in the same dark ink, was another sequence of the stick figures. This one was longer, 7 figures in total. The first was the now familiar signature, the man with arms raised. The next 5 were new, a varied sequence of absurd poses. The 7th was the same tragic, collapsed figure that had signalled Jed Cooper's death. "He has taken the bait," Holmes whispered, his voice tight with excitement. He laid it beside his previous notes, his eyes darting between the sequences. "The signature!" Then the new message, and the full stop. He is telling Finch that his fate is sealed. He became a man possessed, grabbing pencils and paper, scribbling notations, muttering to himself. We have DIE from the first message. We can assign those letters to the second, third, and fourth figures. Now, using that, we can begin to decipher the most common letters in this new sequence. I watched, mesmerized, as his mind, that magnificent instrument, began to dismantle the code. He compared the frequency of the new figures to the most common letters in English. He tested words like meet and come and time. The room fell away for him. There was only the puzzle. After nearly an hour of intense, silent labor, during which I dared not utter a word, he let out a sharp, triumphant cry. "Got it! By heavens, the man's vanity is his undoing." He uses a simple substitution cipher, but his arrogance made him think it unbreakable. "Listen, Watson, and observe." He pointed to the new message. The first figure is his signature. We ignore it for the message itself. The next 5 figures spell out his reply. Using the key I have built, it decodes to TONIGAT. "Tonight?" I exclaimed. "Precisely." The following figure is the same as the 4th in the first message, which we have as E. So tonight E, no, that's not it. E is the end of the word. He rearranged his papers, his eyes blazing. "No, Watson, look. The 7th figure is the full stop, the threat of death. The 6th figure is part of the message. The word is not 5 letters, it is 6. Tonight is the first 6 letters. The final figure, the 6th in the sequence, is a new one. Combined with tonight," he scribbled madly, applying his key. "The 6th figure represents the letter T. The message is tonight T. No, tonight is the entire word. The T must be the beginning of the next word." He stared at the sequence, and I saw the blood drain from his face. Good God, it is not 1 word, it is 2. Tonight, and then a 2-letter word beginning with T. He deciphered the final figure, the one before the full stop. His hand slowed. The final letter is O, a 2-letter word. T-O, T-O, the message is tonight too. He looked up, and in his eyes was a cold fire I had seldom seen. He's not naming a location. He is completing a phrase. The message is not meet tonight. It is tonight, to what? To die? To finish it? Holmes's head snapped towards the window, as if he could see through the London night to the villain's lair. The first message said die. This one says tonight too. It is an instruction, a completion. Tonight to die. He is announcing his intention to kill Finch tonight. He surged to his feet, grabbing his coat. "There is no time to lose, Watson." The hand-delivered note means he is close, watching. He knows Finch is at Blackheath. He will strike there, under cover of darkness. We must telegraph Lestrade to meet us there with his men, and we must go now. Our cab ride to Blackheath was a nightmare of urgency. Holmes sat bolt upright, his every sense straining towards our destination. He had sent the telegraph from the station, a terse message of life and death. The villa was dark, but for a single light in a downstairs window when we arrived, the home of a man who believed himself to be in mourning, not in mortal peril. We did not go to the front door. Instead, Holmes led me around the back, into the shadowed garden, where the shapes of bushes and trees loomed like malevolent spectres in the weak moonlight. "We cannot alert him," Holmes breathed, his voice barely a whisper. "If he sees us, he will abort and vanish. We must be the unseen spectators." We took up a position behind a thick laurel bush that gave us a view of the rear of the house and the French windows of the drawing room. The minutes ticked by, each one an agony. The night was cold and silent, the only sound, the rustle of leaves in a faint breeze. Then a figure emerged from the deeper shadows near the garden wall, a man tall and lean, moving with a predatory grace. He was dressed in dark clothes, a cap pulled low over his brow. In one hand he carried a heavy, wicked-looking cosh. He did not skulk or creep. He walked with a chilling certainty straight towards the French windows, as if he owned the property and had every right to be there. It was the walk of the dancing man himself, the walk of a man who believed he was invincible. He tested the handle of the French window. It was locked. Without a moment's hesitation, he took a small metallic tool from his pocket and began to work on the lock. Holmes's hand closed like a vice on my arm. We watched, frozen, as the lock gave with a faint click that seemed to echo in the silent garden. The figure slid the window open and stepped inside into the dark drawing room. "Now, Watson!" Holmes cried, and we burst from our concealment, racing across the lawn. We were at the window just as a lamp was turned up inside. The scene within was frozen in the sudden light. The intruder stood over the armchair where Alistair Finch sat, seemingly asleep. The cosh was raised high, ready to descend upon his skull. But the man was staring, not at Finch, but at the figure in the chair. It was not Finch. It was a dummy dressed in Finch's dressing gown and cap, propped up with pillows. The man uttered a foul oath in a guttural accent, Russian, and began to turn, but it was too late. "Ivanov!" Holmes's voice rang out, sharp and clear as a pistol shot. "The dance is over!" The man spun around, his face a mask of fury and shock. It was a hard, handsome face with high cheekbones and a neatly trimmed dark beard. The eyes that met ours were intelligent, cold, and filled with a terrifying rage. At that moment the doors to the hallway burst open, and Inspector Lestrade and 2 constables surged into the room, their revolvers drawn. "You are surrounded," Lestrade announced. "Drop your weapon." Ivanov's eyes darted from us to the police, calculating his odds. The cosh clattered to the floor, but his hand moved swiftly to another pocket. "He has a gun," I shouted, but it was not a gun he withdrew. It was a small notebook and a pencil. With a speed that was breathtaking, he scribbled something, tore out the page, and flung it towards us with a contemptuous snarl. It fluttered to the carpet at Holmes's feet. Upon it, he had drawn a single, fresh, dancing figure. This one was not dancing. It was standing upright, its arms crossed over its chest, in a gesture of defiant, utter superiority. Then he put his hands in the air, a smug, infuriating smile playing on his lips. He knew we had him for breaking and entering, for attempted assault. But he believed with every fibre of his being that the greater secrets, the kidnapping, the murder, the fraud, were still locked away behind his unbreakable code. The dance, for him, was not over. It had merely entered a new, more challenging movement. The drawing room of the Blackheath villa was transformed from a stage for murder into a theatre of justice. Gas lamps were lit, casting a warm, steady glow that banished the shadows where treachery had lurked moments before. Ivanov, his hands now secured in irons, stood between two stout constables, his arrogant smile undimmed. Lestrade, flushed with triumph, was already composing his report in his head. Holmes ignored them all. He stooped and picked up the latest drawing, the defiant crossed figure, studying it with a look of pure contempt. "You believe this protects you?" he said, his voice low and cold. "You believe your childish cipher is a wall between you and the gallows. You are mistaken. It is the very evidence that will hang you." Ivanov's smile did not falter. "A drawing, Mr. Holmes? You will find it inadmissible. And you will find nothing else. My house, my affairs, are impeccable. We shall see," Holmes said, turning his back on the man. He addressed Lestrade. "Inspector, you will escort our prisoner to the yard. Then you will meet me at his residence on Moscow Road with a warrant. The evidence we seek is there. I am sure of it." As Ivanov was led away, still radiating a maddening confidence, Alistair Finch emerged from his hiding place in the study, his face pale but resolute. "Good heavens, Holmes, you saved my life." "The game is not yet won, Mr. Finch," Holmes replied. "The finale awaits us at Moscow Road." The Ivanov residence, when we arrived with Lestrade and a half-dozen officers, was a portrait of opulent silence. The Russian footman, now terrified, granted us entry. The interior was as overdone as the exterior, a gaudy display of wealth with little taste, gilded mirrors, heavy crimson drapes, and malachite tables. Madame Ivanov descended the grand staircase as we entered. She was indeed a beautiful woman with dark, flashing eyes and a proud bearing, wrapped in a silk dressing gown. Her scent, the distinct Jardin de la Nuit, preceded her like a declaration of war. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" she demanded, her accent thick, her voice trembling with a rage that I suspected was genuine. "We are here regarding the affairs of Theobald Grayson and Jed Cooper," Holmes stated, his tone icy and formal. "I know no such persons." "Then you will not object to us confirming that," Holmes said, and without waiting for permission, he led the way. His certainty was uncanny. He moved through the lavish rooms with unerring purpose, straight to a locked door on the first floor, which the footman, under pressure, revealed was Mr. Ivanov's private study. The door was stout, but Lestrade's men made short work of it with a crowbar. The room within was a shock. After the gaudy decor of the house, it was starkly, severely functional. A large desk, a safe, and walls lined not with books but with ledgers and maps of shipping routes. It was the nerve center of the fraud. Holmes went directly to the desk. In a hidden drawer cunningly concealed by a sliding panel, he found what we sought: Theobald Grayson's private logbook, and beside it a folio of papers. Holmes opened it and gave a grim smile of triumph. It contained page after page of practice sketches, the dancing men, dozens of them, evolving from crude attempts to the precise, arrogant figures of the threats. "His practice book," Holmes said, holding it up. "The vanity of the artist." He could not bear to destroy his drafts, but Holmes was not finished. His eyes scanned the room, missing nothing. He strode to the large fireplace and looked up the flue. Reaching up, his long fingers probed a loose brick in the interior chimney breast. From the cavity behind it, he pulled out a single, folded sheet of paper. It was a letter. The handwriting was neat, precise, and unmistakably English. It was signed by Theobald Grayson. "The missing piece?" Holmes murmured, his eyes scanning the contents. "The victim's own testimony." He read it aloud, his voice filling the silent, captured room. My dear Alistair, if you are reading this, I am likely dead, or worse. I have been a fool. Seduced by a beautiful face and the promise of easy wealth, I have allowed myself to be ensnared in Ivanov's fraudulent schemes. The profits are a fiction built on lies and future promises we cannot keep. I have tried to extricate myself, but he and his wife are ruthless. He speaks in riddles and codes, a man obsessed with his own cleverness. He has threatened not only me, but you, and the business if I speak a word. I fear I have doomed us all. I am hiding this record of the true accounts in the only place I can think of. Forgive me. Finch let out a choked sob, sinking into a chair.
Theobald, oh, my poor friend!
Madame Ivanov's haughty demeanour collapsed. She stared at the letter, her face a mask of horror. The evidence was now incontrovertible. The logbook detailing the fraud, the practice drawings of the code, and now Grayson's own confession, hidden by the victim himself and found by the man who had murdered him. "The game is truly over, madame," Holmes said, turning his relentless gaze upon her. "Your husband's arrogance led him to keep trophies of his crime. Your vanity led you to wear your perfume to a kidnapping. Together you have constructed your own downfall." Lestrade could not hide his glee. "A brilliant piece of work, Mr. Holmes. Absolutely brilliant. We have them cold. Murder, kidnapping, fraud." "And what of Theobald?" Finch asked, his voice raw with grief. "What did they do with him?" Holmes's face grew sombre. "That, I fear, we will learn from the river police." Ivanov's shipping connections provided him with the perfect means of disposal. I doubt we shall ever recover the body. The following week, the headlines screamed the story. The scandal of Grayson and Finch, the exposure of the massive fraud, the brutal murder of Jed Cooper, and the arrest of the enigmatic Russian shipping magnate Ivanov and his wife held London in thrall. The prosecution's case, built on the foundation of evidence Holmes had uncovered, was unassailable. Back in the familiar comfort of 221B Baker Street, with a cheerful fire crackling in the hearth, I reflected on the intricate web we had untangled. "It was the code that fascinated me most, Holmes," I said, sipping my brandy. "The sheer audacity of it." Holmes, languid in his armchair, waved a dismissive hand. "The code was the least of it, Watson. A simple substitution cipher, its weakness exposed by its creator's ego. The true key was always the psychology. The villain who must document his own cleverness is a villain who longs to be caught. He does not want a silent victory, he wants an audience for his masterpiece. I merely accepted the invitation to the performance, and a deadly performance it was," I remarked. "Indeed. But remember, Watson, the most dangerous deceptions are not those played in locked rooms or written in code. They are those we play on ourselves. Theobald Grayson deceived himself into believing he could control the monster he helped create. Ivanov deceived himself into believing his intellect placed him above the law. It is a common and fatal flaw. He picked up his violin and drew the bow across the strings, releasing a low, melancholic note that seemed to hold all the tragedy and folly of the case within it. "They were dancing men, Watson," he said softly, staring into the flames. "All of them. Dancing to the tune of their own greed, pride, and self-deception. And in the end, they all danced right into the abyss." He began to play a slow, haunting melody, and I knew the case was closed. The Sherlock Holmes mystery, with its intricate logic and dark human passions, had reached its final satisfying chord.